The broadhead stuck him right in the side of the head. And I never will forget watching him run off with that arrow sticking straight out of the side of his head.
I saw antlers. Was one of those, oh my God, that's a huge deer.
There'd be tools lying around, and my wife would be walking around piles of sawdust.
I couldn't shoot because I couldn't shoot through that massive shoulder. This is a 10.5 foot, 1,500 pound brown bear.
Get recalibrated, be immersed in nature.
I went and cut a persimmon tree, and I made my first probably 24 bows out of persimmon.
That's how we dominated our fights, because we never got off the horse. We just kept shooting and battling.
As men, we have something in our DNA that seeks adventure.
I like nothing more than teaching this to other people, bringing people in from all walks of life and showing them this ancient art of bow making.
I've been bit by alligators and charged by bears, and I've been involved in plane crashes and boat flips.
I fell hard on my ass, and now I chuckled about it. That really sucked. It was also a wake-up call.
My mother looked at me, she said, "Where'd you get that bow and arrows?" And I said, "I swapped my bicycle for it."
You don't go to Alaska because it's going to be super easy. You don't pick up a traditional bow because it's going to be easy. You do it for the challenge and the journey of overcoming difficult things.
He started forward, and as that leg came forward, I drew and released, and the bear was so big that the entire 30-inch arrow vanished inside his chest.
Welcome to the Bowyer's podcast, where we explore the ancient art of bow making, traditional archery, and the age-old pursuit of wild game. Together, we'll chat with masters of their craft to uncover the deeper why behind reviving the old ways in a modern world.
I just wanted to say that so far, all the times that I hunted, even the ones that I didn't shoot an animal, I had an amazing time.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to the show. Thanksgiving, it's come and gone. I'm still fat and sassy from all the food I ate last week. Smoked a big fat turkey, and it was really good. Had a good time with friends and family, and I hope that you did too. We're now in late whitetail season for the most part, and all things Christmas prep. We're getting ready to put the tree up in our house here, and I'm surprised actually. We usually have it up right around Thanksgiving, and we're a few days late at this point, but life is busy. Hey, just want to take a few moments to highlight once again, we've got the website up and running. It's www.thebowyercollective.com. One of the best ways you can support the show is by paying that website a little bit of a visit and looking at some of the merch and picking out some things for you and yours and your loved ones. In addition, giving our show partners some love. So the great folks at Bowyer Archery and Vooney Gear, Plied But Dangerous Tools, Nukem Outdoors, Arrow 6 Coffee, Selway Archery, Bastion Head Tools, all these great folks that have partnered with us and give us a little bit of love. And when you support them, you're supporting us, right? So I appreciate any support that you all can give in the form of getting some swag on the website or supporting our partners, particularly those small businesses that most of which desperately need some support during the winter months, right? So skip the Amazon.coms and the Walmarts and the Targets. Support some of these folks as small businesses or small businesses local to you, particularly the artisans of the world, and give them some love, okay? We have an awesome guest today. I'm super stoked to have Josh Smith on of Montana Knife Company. I tell you guys, growing up, I always heard about the American dream. And as I've gotten a little bit older, I've almost become a little disenchanted with that phrase because there's so much nonsense happening in the world or in society. And I feel like for the most part, the quote unquote man is trying to keep the little guys down. And Josh Smith is an example of, despite the hardships or obstacles that are in your way, if you have enough skill, gusto, and ambition, you can make it happen. And he's built something from a little knife shop working out of his garage to what it is today, right? Josh has now employed, I think, 90 to 100 employees, and he's got these knife drops that happen every so often, and they sell out very quickly, and he curates his brand to outdoorsmen and outdoorswomen and hunters. And it was great talking to him about it. Also, I've never really heard Josh's origin story, And it was great to understand the man behind Montana Knife Company, pick his brain a little bit, and see that the American dream can be and is still alive. But before we get to Josh's dialogue with Josh, we're going to have Luke Tabor on, where Luke is a North Carolina native, very avid traditional bow hunter, and Luke has gotten a couple does on the ground during this year's archery season, and he shares his story. I'll put Luke's social media content and handle and all that stuff in the show notes. All right, my monologue is over. I appreciate you guys bearing with me here. Again, give us reviews, get some merch on the website, support our partners as you start prepping for gifts and such to you and your loved ones and friends and family and all that good stuff as we work up to the Christmas holiday. And email us anytime at thebowyercollective@gmail.com to give us some feedback. We love to hear from you. All right, take care.
It's an early October morning here in North Carolina, and it's pretty warm. We haven't had a whole lot of cold weather. Matter of fact, I don't know that we've even had our first frost. And I'm hunting not 30 yards from my front door. And at this spot, I was getting 6 to 7 deer a day on camera. And as they come out of their summer patterns, it's dwindled down to 1 to 2 deer a day. And so I had decided that even though I knew there were some good deer back there, whatever comes in first, so long as it doesn't have spots, I'm going to shoot it. Now, this is with the knowledge that there's a nice 10-pointer out there that the neighbor across the street had actually knocked on my door at midnight, and I know that he about had a heart attack because I live on the side of a mountain. I don't get people knocking on my door, much less at midnight. So I know the guy just about had a heart attack when all he saw through the kitchen door was my hand reach around the wall and flick the lights off, and then me come out the other side of the house in full kit, bulletproof vest, and a rifle in my hands. And he's got his hands up in the air going, "Whoa, I'm just hunting across the street." And I said, "And you think that your deer ran over here? You want me to get my bird dog?" And so I know that he let out a sigh of relief as he audibly heard the safety click back on my SIG MCX and sling it over my shoulder, turn around to go get my bird dog and go help him find his deer. We ended up not finding it ourselves and called a thermal drone, and the thermal drone verified that he hit the deer very high. The deer was going to live for sure. So I knew that I had a chance to shoot this 10-point that was still alive. But like I said, with only taking 1 deer so far in the season, I really wanted to get some more meat in the freezer. So whatever comes in, so long as it doesn't have spots, it's going to get whacked. So I get out there late. It's about 7:15 in the morning. I'm all layered up, and it's warmer than I expected. So I'm out there shedding layers, trying to get the camera set up. And as I'm getting the camera set up, I look up and there's an outline coming over the hill. So I just click the cameras on real quick and try to get my bow all set up, get my arrow on there. And the deer walks in, and we sit there and play the bobblehead game for probably 10 minutes, back and forth, just looking down, looking up, super spooked because he's so close to the house. Even though they're used to us being there, they're still spooky anytime they're that close to humans and cars and whatnot. After about 10 minutes of playing the bobblehead game, my wife comes out the kitchen door and shuts it. And he did not like that at all. He immediately pranced off, spooked, but at the same time not spooked from me. He just knew that he heard something he didn't like. And so he goes hopping off, and my heart's beating out of my chest. I've got this deer at 10 yards here. I'm thinking I'm about to get a shot. I'm burning a hole already with my eyes right behind his shoulder blade. And he runs out there to about 40 yards. And that morning I had just been drinking a whole bunch of coffee and listening to Stranglehold by Ted Nugent. And I was just amped up and feeling confident. And I've been practicing a lot lately, even out 50, 60 yards. And so I'm like, subconsciously, I think that my mind just went, "You got this, Luke." And so as soon as he pranced off, as soon as he stopped, I'm going, "Meh." Finally stops and turns, and I let it fly. And you can see on the freeze frame on YouTube, the frame by frame, that if he had not moved, that arrow would have went right in the pocket, right behind the shoulder. But by the time that arrow got there out of a 51-pound longbow at 40 yards, he had ducked and spun, and that arrow went in right behind his rib cage and went through and hit the opposite side ribs. So I got lung, liver. It was a kill shot for sure. He ended up running 150 yards. But I didn't find him. Me and Oakley, my GSP, my bird dog, went to go look. We couldn't find any blood, no luck. So I ended up calling the thermal drone, who found him in the field across the street. that the gentleman had actually shot the big 10-pointer in. So the deer are just running back and forth between the two properties. So go over there, find the deer, get to gut it. That's where I verified that I got lung and liver. It was a good shot, but there was no exit wound. And so that's why there was no blood, and I had a really hard time finding that specific deer. Now, all to say, would I take that shot again? No. That's a heat of the moment. Your subconscious takes over. Your kind of eyes relax as your stare intensifies, and you're just in that predator mindset of just, the deer's getting away, man, stop it, take the shot. You're just feeling confident. With a deer that alert, I definitely would not take a 40-yard shot like that with a longbow again. Maybe if the deer had absolutely no idea that I was there and he was turned and looked the other way, I'm pretty confident in my shooting ability, but would not take that shot again on a deer that has run and I've had to actually bleed at to stop. So all in all, I was very blessed to recover that deer. It was a great hunt. That's the furthest that I've ever shot a whitetail at. So I had a good time, was very blessed to get some more meat in the freezer. And if you want to see that, you can go to borntokill.com and watch the video on that hunt. But yeah, man, very blessed. That was deer number 2 for the season, and hopefully, Lord willing, we'll get several more in the freezer before the year's over.
All right, good morning and welcome to the Bowyer podcast. Appreciate everybody joining us here in the middle of the holiday season. Out here in Eastern North Carolina, it's been unusually warm, which is my excuse for not putting as many deer on the ground as I would like to. But we do have a cold front coming up, so I hope that keeps things moving. I hope everybody else has full freezers by now. If not, just keep working at it and you'll get there. This episode is brought to you by Safari Tough. I've been using Safari Tough carbon arrows for quite a while now. They're nearly indestructible. Reach out to Safari Tough and use discount code BOWYERPOD10. All right, so turning to our guests, we've got a guy that pretty much everybody knows unless you've been living under a rock, especially if you like tools that you can use in the field. Mr. Josh Smith, master bladesmith and man behind Montana Knife Company. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you coming on here and joining this little radio show.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it.
So, Josh, I think a lot of people know certainly about the prowess and the quality of Montana Knife Company. You guys seem to sell out nearly every single drop that you have, and it's really remarkable. About every person I know carries an MKC blade in the field, especially if they're hunters and outdoorsmen. But I don't know if everybody really knows the origin story of what the grit and grind that brought you to this point that is tremendously successful, especially over just the last, 5 years or so. And you started as a regular guy. And I think in a lot of ways, you still very much are. I was talking to somebody recently, it's like in some of our mutual friend circle, and was like, Josh is probably out there like on a forklift or a backhoe helping build his own shop right now for the big build. And I was like, yeah, that probably sounds about right. Man, just can you take us back a few years, whatever seems necessary, and tell us where you grew up, where you came from, and really what started this passion?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Some of my origin actually is what you just talked about, which is running equipment and backhoes. And it is funny, I actually am still using those skills today to help even build our business. I do rent equipment often and did a bunch of dirt work around our new facility, and I'm constantly doing stuff like that. I actually prefer that instead of sitting in front of a computer. And I still actually get in the shop. Like this morning, I was out here about 5:30 and sharpened knives up until this podcast started. So helping the team sharpen during this busy time. But yeah, this all kind of started way back in 1992. But it definitely wasn't Montana Knife Company at that point. My Little League baseball coach was an outfitter in the Bob Marshall Wilderness and working on a ranch there locally. And he was my Little League baseball coach, and he would bring knives to practice and show the parents. He had really just started making knives at that point. Looking back on it, I thought his knives were awesome, but at the time he was just getting started and they were probably pretty rough. But I thought they were cool, being an 11-year-old kid, and I thought hunting was cool and all that stuff. And so I guess I must have been constantly asking him questions because and pretty infatuated, because my parents bought me one of his knives for Christmas that year. And then right during the Christmas school break, he invited me up to make a knife in the shop with him. And so I went up and made one over a little bit of time. And then I think I made 2 or 3 in his shop maybe, and probably 2. And then I think probably his way of getting rid of me was to tell me if I wanted to be a knife maker, I had to have my own shop. I had grown up working in my parents' excavation business, and that's what we did in the summers. And I had a little bit of money saved. I had a lawn mowing business. So I bought a big purchase for me back then, but I think it cost me like $250. But I bought a belt grinder and I put it in my dad's shop along with some other little tools. And I was making a heck of a mess in my dad's shop with that sander. And over that next year, my dad realized this was probably not gonna, I was only doing more and more in there. So he enclosed a little lean-to that we had out back that he just had for an equipment shed. That was an open, kind of a three-sided open lean-to. He enclosed one of the little 10 by 10 sections of that. And we cut some benches on my dad's sawmill, and we cut the lumber for all that on my dad's sawmill, and we enclosed all that. And I started working in that shed. It was uninsulated, so in the wintertime, it was quite cold. I remember my grinding buckets of water underneath my grinder were always frozen, and I would stand there in insulated coveralls and grind my knives. And that's really how I got started into it.
That's really beautiful, man. I just love the fact, one, that you were drawn to something at such a young age. I think a lot of us bounce from sport to sport or hobby to hobby in our youth, or if you're like me, until you're 40, like now. But you latched onto something and you were really dedicated, and even more like your old man saw this and was like, all right, let's give you some dedicated space, because you're obviously very passionate about this and you were demonstrating your own grit and grind to that as well, whether it was running equipment or your landscaping, lawn mowing and stuff like that. You didn't, at that point though, even as a young man, knife making wasn't necessarily your career though, right? This has been a gradual process. And MKC, when did MKC actually start coming into fruition?
Yeah, honestly, all the way, I got real serious about the knife making through junior high and into high school. And I actually tested for and became the youngest journeyman knife maker in the world when I was 15. And then the youngest master bladesmith when I was 19. And all my thought process really around that time period was trying to catch my mentors. I kept trying to make knives or do things that were as good as the guys that I was learning from. But I was in a really fortunate position. I didn't realize this until decades later, but the guys I was learning from were on their own crazy steep learning curve. And really, actually, over the next 20 years, they were going to become some of the top knife makers in the country. And that's just a real fortune of good luck. There's a lot of knife makers out there that are making knives in their lean-to and not really striving for real great things or trying to really like have it become something that they're really super professional about. I just happened to be learning from guys that were. And so the whole time I was trying to make a knife as good as what they were making, they were getting better and the goalpost was moving. And that was actually a bit frustrating over the years because they were also very hard on me. I don't really hardly ever remember him saying good job, or it was always critiquing what I was doing and telling me this could be better, that could be better. And at times I remember just as a kid being like, I'm never going to make them happy. I'm never just having a sour attitude sometimes of I just can't, I'm never going to be as good as them. But it was a blessing because it was making me push to get better. And that's something that I feel very fortunate about. And it wasn't probably until I was about 19 or 20 years old that I handed a knife to a guy, one of my mentors at a show in Atlanta, Georgia, showed him what I'd built. And this is all pre-internet, right? So like when you went to a show, you unveiled stuff for the first time. They weren't seeing the progress pictures or any of that stuff. I handed it to him and he looked at it and he's like, holy shit, that's good. And I was like, it took me back. Like I got a compliment.
Yeah, it seems like that type of vernacular was foreign language out of his mouth until it really hit, right?
Yeah, and it really was resonated like I've arrived. And So really I guess my point is all my efforts were in trying to become as good a knife maker, custom knife maker as I could. It wasn't really around a production knife company or any of that. I will say when I was 19, I registered the name Montana Knife Company with the state of Montana. I knew I wanted to build a hunting knife company someday. But at 19 years old, I had no idea how to build a business or how to do production knives. Honestly, at that time, I was still just focused on making the best custom knives possible. And those were, over the next few years, those knives became $5,000-$10,000 a piece. Very expensive knives, high-end collector items, a long ways from what I'm doing with MKC. And so I told the story of what I wanted to build as a hunting knife company to a friend of mine in my early 20s. And for the next 10 years, he was just like, you have to do this. He was a big marketing guy. And he's your plan, your story, all this stuff, you've got to do it. The knife world needs it. And I made every excuse as to why I couldn't start it. Some of it was financially, some of it was just the state that my marriage was in at that time with my ex-wife, having 4 young babies, just all of it, right? And in 2012 or 13, my house burned down. I was divorced. I had 4 kids, and I was living in a camper in my driveway. And honestly, it's about a low point as you can get. And no even thought about starting Montana Knife Company at that point. I was purely in survival and like, how am I even going to be able to build a home? And I started rebuilding. And the next year I met my new wife, Jessica, and I told her the idea of Montana Knife Company. And when we had gotten married, she said, hey, you go start your company. I got the kids in the house. Like, you need to do this, chase your dream. And so her dad had passed away and we inherited like $19,000. And she gave me that money and said, go buy steel to start MKC. And so in 2019, I cut some prototypes. And at Winter Strong in 2020 is when I got to go there. Neil Kamamura was kind enough to invite me to come demonstrate with him. And I brought like 10 prototype Blackfoot knives to that event. And I showed them around that event and started telling people like, I'm going to build this company. This is what I'm thinking. And to be honest, I was doing that and I was saying that, but I didn't have a lot of belief necessarily. And that event was the event that changed everything for me, because when you hang around so many accomplished people like that, when everywhere you turn, there's someone who built a business or went to the Olympics or made it in the professional athlete world or in the business world or whatever it was, bow makers, gun makers, just all these amazing people, everyone there had gone out and just believed in themselves and succeeded. And all those people were telling me like, we got your back, you can do this, you should do this. And my wife and I walked away from that event with so much like motivation and confidence of, we need to go do this. And that was really the starting moment for MKC.
Man, I like hearing that. So like I was fortunate enough to go to Winter Strong in 23, and people still told your story from when you were there 3 years prior. And they're like, oh, look, man, like this is, because talking, I think maybe to like Brandon Lilly or somebody was like, man, I got such imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? I'm just a guy that kind of has a microphone and I make bows. I've had the pleasure of having great tutelage mentorship from Corey Hawk, and who also is a longtime veteran of Winter Strong. And when you leave that, everybody, even the most affluent, or the guy with the most medals on their neck, or the most Super Bowl wins here, everybody here feels like they don't belong because they feel like the attendees are so esteemed. They're like, how did I get here? They're like, you need to understand that and accept that we're all here. And that's what makes this thing special, is because you leave that place with such a fire in your belly and under your feet to go do better things, regardless of whether it's a craft or a business or fitness related, or just kind of getting your shit together as a husband and father and whatever. It's pretty special, man. And I didn't get to meet you there that year, but I thought it was really compelling when they're like, for example, Josh Smith of MKC was here and he was just talking about this thing a few years ago. And now look at where MKC is. Like, he has this fire and gusto and gumption to move it. And this was probably like a little bit of a tipping point to compel or push your decision to move forward. And man, the organicness, if that's a word, of that decision and that pivotal moment in your life, I think is really beautiful. And I think people need more instances, or need to at least recognize those instances in their lives.
Yeah, and I think there's a lesson to be learned that even if you're not someone who attends Winter Strong, I think surrounding yourself with people that you think are living life the right way and accomplishing things. And I don't care. It doesn't have to be, this isn't a financial thing. Oh, you just need to go hang around rich business people. It could be like a Corey Hawk that makes incredible bows, right? It could be a gun maker. It could just be a guy that runs a really great roofing business, and you want to go start your own blue collar business, and you want to see how that person goes about their daily life. Like, how do they organize their schedule? How do they talk to their employees? How do they treat their customers? And I found myself realizing that, and it's nothing against any of the people in my community necessarily, but sometimes you need to step outside your normal, just kind of friend circle where it's comfortable, and put yourself in an uncomfortable spot where maybe you feel like you're around some people that have done more than you have done, or have pushed harder, or worked harder, and learn what those habits are, whether it's the fact what time they get up, or like I say, how they organize their day. And that for me was Winter Strong. It was that feeling of definitely an imposter syndrome, 100%. Like I absolutely felt like I didn't belong there, but I also felt that if those people believed in what I was doing, why wouldn't I? And at that point I went home. That was February of 2020. On the way home in the airports, we were seeing this rumor mill about this COVID thing. And frankly, a week after we were home, like shit was hitting the fan. And honestly, in 2010, the last time, this is another, I think, lesson for people. I think people sit around the living room watching TV and listening to and letting society build excuses into their own head about why they're in the position that they're in, or why they can't go chase their dream or do something because of this or that on television. An example, in 2008, 9, 10, during the housing crash kind of time, my 5-6 year backlog of custom knife orders went to about 6 months, like overnight. The first thing people cut out of their budget in tough time are $5,000 knives. And so it was during that time, Obama was president. I'm watching the news. We're in a recession, and everybody's talking about we could be going into a depression, and all the sky was falling. And that's the time that I was teaching a friend of mine how to make knives, and he was a welder for the local power company, a utility company on the gas side. And I ended up applying for and got a job operating backhoe for them, and decided I'm going to go take a job with benefits and that safety net, 401k, all these things that you don't have when you're a custom knife maker. If you make custom bows for a living, or custom knives, or custom guns, it's a starving artist situation a lot of times, where you might make up 5 or 6 knives or 10 bows or whatever, and you go to a show and you sell them all, and you come home with a bunch of cash in your pocket, and you feel like you're the richest guy in your town. And then you pay all the bills that you've been putting off. And by the time you get to your next show, you're broke again. And it's a tough, if Corey Hawk's making bows full time, and he's not in his shop making bows, he's not making money. So the whole time you sit in your tree stand, I had this guilt issue where if I'm out sitting in my tree stand and it's a little bit of a slow morning, I'm sitting there thinking I should be in my shop
making knives. Yeah,
I should be making knives. We're not making any money. If I go on a vacation on a Monday through a Friday, I just lost a week of potential income. And so during that time period, I took that job, and over the next 10 years, I ended up getting an apprenticeship, and I became a journeyman lineman for the power company working on power lines.
Okay.
And when I went to Winter Strong, I was still a lineman. And when I started MKC, I was doing the lineman thing, and I was doing it before and after work. And when COVID came around, I was watching TV, and I had this fresh motivation from Winter Strong to start this company. And then here's the breaking news on television. Pandemic, the world's ending, we're shutting down businesses and all this stuff. And I told my wife, we are not watching television, and I am ignoring this. Last time that there was the last time that the world was ending, I changed the course of my goals and my career path because I ran from and I'm not even saying that I look back on it, like I wouldn't change anything that I did. But at that moment, I made my decision based on my career path, based on the breaking news on CNN. During COVID, I said, I'm flat out ignoring it. And I listened to Andy Frisella and basically was just in my shop being pissed off and at the world. And I'm not letting COVID or anyone tell me that this dream isn't possible. And through 2020, during the shutdown and everything, I just came home after work and made knives till late. I got up early, made knives, and we launched our website in July. And by the end of 2020, my wife kept telling me, you need to quit your job and do this. And that's the point where I was like, boy, I don't know. Like, I'm making $100,000 a year as a lineman. We got benefits. It seems very selfish to quit that to go chase my knife dream. But she was the one pushing me. And finally, the last day of 2020 is when I quit my job. And that January 1st of 21 was, to me, where it was like, okay, all the chips are to the center of the table. We're all in.
That one, I got to talk about this because this is awesome. One, I too married up, and I wouldn't be doing any of the things I'm doing if it wasn't for my bride being much more supportive and just smarter than I am to like help me be a better man. So
yeah,
I'm very blessed. Want to recognize that. Two, so that day, so 1 January 2021, those feelings, was it of liberation? Was it, oh shit, we're really doing this? What if I fail? How did that feel, if you don't mind me peeling back that layer a little bit?
Yeah, I wanted to throw up.
It wasn't from the New Year's hangover?
No, I actually needed December 31st off because Thomas Rhett, the country music singer, was down in Big Sky and wanted to meet and get a couple knives. And I needed that day off. And my boss was telling me I was out of vacation. And that whole week, I kept talking to him about getting that day because I had 4 weeks of vacation reloaded on January 1st, the next day. I'm like, dude, work with me on this. Nope, can't do it. And my wife kept telling me to quit. And so I walked in there December 30th and I was like, hey, man, I need tomorrow off. What are we going to do about this? And he's, yeah, you're out of vacation. And I said, all right, I'll be done at noon. And I quit. And that was the push that I needed. But when I drove home from there, I still remember, man, driving home. There's 2 times that I drove home from my job where I felt like I was going to throw up. The first time when my house burnt down 20 miles away to the west, the whole way down the interstate, I could see the plume of smoke on the horizon that was my house. So that's one of them. You drive for 25 minutes straight, just staring at a giant black plume that you know is your home. That's one of them. And then driving home that day, and I was thinking, man, what did I just do? Like, I just quit a job that in our area is about as good a money as a blue collar guy could make and benefits and all that. But it was also like that next day of waking up of you just quit your job, you put your family in this position, like you have to go like crazy. And I don't really remember feeling a lot of excitement about it. It was more almost like desperation of you cannot fail. This is a no fail situation. And we had a little bit of savings, and Brandon and I, basically my business partner, we didn't take a paycheck until like June, July of that year. We just put everything back into the business. And our goal that year of 21 was we met with an insurance agent and we needed business insurance. And, you know, they base that off of your revenue. Of course, we really hadn't done much. And let's just base it off your goal. What's a conservative goal of what you guys think you can make this year on making knives? And I said, let's just set it at $100,000. If we do 100,000 in sales this year, I'll be happy. I know we'll clear enough money to survive. And that we did 1.1 million that year.
Man.
Yeah.
It was meant to happen. That's just, you're just like, okay, this is the right path. We did the thing. We went out and took all this risk. And yeah. And really that Winter Strong community continued.
and frankly, the entire outdoor community. That community, we didn't have any money for advertising. We didn't buy an ad. We didn't pay for any advertising for 2 years. It was all word of mouth, and it was all just people telling other people about us and doing some collab projects and just different things where much, much bigger brands allowed us to work with them. And it was really through the Total Archery Challenge community. Winter Strong was huge. And then from there, frankly, from that community, the next year I started going to Total Archery Challenges. And that vendor village around there, all these different people from the archery community, whether it was guides and outfitters, whether it was bow manufacturers, just outdoor gear companies, whatever, all throughout the industry, frankly, people were just so kind. And it felt like a real family. Like the archery community feels like such a family. And I think that's what's so cool about going to a bow shoot, whether it's an attack or it's just a smaller bow shoot in your town. It's such a good family event to go to where people have, it doesn't matter if the guy's shooting 90 yards with his compound bow and his best friend is shooting a longbow that he made and he doesn't shoot over 25 yards. Those people all get along so well, and it's just such a cool community. And they were so supportive of MKC early.
That's wonderful, man. I love it. I love couple of things that we also hit on here a lot on the podcast is the importance of mentors. And I feel like today, mentors are almost an endangered species unless you're in maybe a trade. And I've been fortunate enough, I did the military thing and government, and I've had some exceptional mentors, and I find myself latching on to a mentor if I go into a role or something of that nature, but also developing mentorship programs for folks that are junior or younger or whatever else. And I'm trying to, in the workplace, my real occupation is trying to foster that as part of the culture, as having either informal, formal mentorships, because I've been very blessed in my life to have guys and gals that were just amazing rock stars at bringing their wealth of knowledge and lessons learned and trying to help somebody that had the gumption to grow and to experience, into somebody who's coachable. So one, it sounds like you've had from a very young age a breadth of mentors that have really helped shape your craft as a bladesmith, but also your drive and ambitions, because as they were growing, you're trying to catch up, but that needle's always moving, as you said, or the goalpost is always moving. So you're at 1 year, you're looking at your goal sometimes it's probably getting further away instead of getting closer as they were growing. And I think that's really special. Do you still find mentors and mentorship as part of your kind of some of your core values or practices?
Yeah, I think so. And first of all, I want to say you hit on something that I think is so important, and it's missing in this world so much. A guy who was a logger, an outfitting guide, and a rancher took on a little league baseball player of his and just brought him in to teach him to make a knife. And that turned into a $100 million knife company and 90 employees and all this stuff that we're doing and giving away houses to hurricane victims in North Carolina and all the different things that conservation support we're trying to do. And all that came from a guy inviting a kid up to make a knife in his shop. And we do not have enough opportunities, especially for young kids. We talk about what are the problems in inner cities or in these big cities with what's the problem with youth in America today. And they don't frankly have men to go follow around and learn from. Definitely being in a smaller town is much easier if you've got a kid that's interested in that bow maker down the street, that it's much easier for that kid maybe to go run into that guy or knock on his door or see him at a community event and ask him some questions. But if you have a little boy or a little girl in your town, or a young man, a high school kid asking you a bunch of questions about what you do, maybe you're a plumber and you have someone asking you a bunch about your business, invite that kid to come job shadow. Invite that kid to come work on your job site. Invite that kid to come watch you make a bow. Whatever it is, invite that young boy or that young girl to come into the kitchen and help you cook something, or whatever it is that you are good at. Kids need examples and they need mentorship, and we don't have enough of that these days. And we tend to retract so much into our houses, into our televisions and our Instagram and our phones, and be much less community oriented these days. I feel like I could not say enough about, I took it for granted. It was just normal to me. I was just a kid, and I'd ask a 35-year-old guy on how he did whatever he did on a knife, and they would just teach me. And I would go, when I was 15 years old, before cell phones, I had a standby ticket, and I flew all the way across the country to Columbia, South Carolina, to learn how to make knives from George Heron in his shop. And I stayed with him and Miss Barbara for a week at 15 years old. And I had only met him one time in my life. And they just brought me in and taught me how to make knives in his shop for a week. I would also say to parents, don't be afraid to let your kid step out there a little bit and try some things. Like, we tend to shelter kids a lot, or be worried about kids. And there's a lot of dangerous stuff in this world, but I still contend most people are really good. And my parents could have been worried, am I going to get my hand caught in the belt grinder and all this stuff? But instead, they let me really dive into this. And the mentorship thing is huge, but also the mentorship part of business. Don't be afraid to ask successful people questions about how they did what they did. And frankly, you shouldn't ask as much about the successes. You should ask more about the failures, like what to avoid. I got so much great mentorship from a Bert Soren, from Evan Hafer with Black Rifle Coffee, asking guys like, where were the pitfalls? The questions of what were the 2 or 3 things that you would do different, that you wished you would have known in the first 2 years of building your business, the first year, things like that. I think we think of mentorship as for kids.
Yeah.
But I was 38 or 9 years old when I started MKC. And I was asking these guys, some of them younger than me that were successful, questions like I was a 14-year-old, and just fully admitting that I don't know shit about business. I was a lineman and a knife maker. I had no idea how to be a quote unquote CEO. And when it comes to mentorship today, I look at my employees, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I look at my employees downstairs, because half of them are now my kids' age, more as almost my kids, of like, how would I want my kid to be treated in another company? So every Tuesday we have our big company meeting. I run through all kinds of different life things. So I'll bring in like my banker and explain banking and lending and credit scores and like things, frankly, that these kids should be taught in school.
We know our generation, man, our kids' generation, nobody learns that, right?
No. And I bring in my 401k guy and explain investing, and our insurance guy, right? And then I had some guys helping me last fall do some stuff, and I realized these are a bunch of guys that I thought were capable, and they don't know how to run a ratchet strap. I literally brought in ratchet straps to our company meeting. All right, we're going to learn how to use ratchet straps today. And people are looking at me like, what kind of meeting is this? But I am constantly talking to our people downstairs about goals, setting goals, their fitness, their habits in life, like helping their community. And so I try to mentor where I can. And honestly, they're so receptive to it. It's freaking awesome.
That's great, man. And also, like, you're the chief boss man, right? I'm sure the fact that you're leading this from the front, the folks that are 1 or 2 tiers below you are seeing this, are like, okay, now I need to foster this. That way it doesn't become Josh's initiative. It becomes a company culture.
Yeah.
And that's so unique. That's tremendously unique. And
yeah, and our young people, they become leaders, and I see them mentoring the people we hire, which I think is so cool. When I hired Tristan in my shop, he was still in high school at Hellgate High School that spring. And when he graduated, he came to work here full time out here in the summer. He's now managing 40 people downstairs. Wow. When I hired Melissa, she didn't have any experience in anything. She had a nutrition degree, she's managing the other 40 people downstairs. And the other thing that I think has been beneficial in a weird way, I haven't really ever thought of this. I'm sitting here in my shop right now talking to you, and it's in my backyard at my house, my property. So I think these kids, they report to work every day to my house. And so they see, for example, when we were getting our funding to build our next facility, there was some people outside measuring my shop with a tape measure, and we were having a meeting. Somebody goes, "Hey, there's a guy over there measuring your shop." And I said, "Yeah, they're doing an appraisal on my house because I'm putting my house and all of this up for collateral to get a loan on our new building." And I think some of them might have thought, "Oh, Josh's getting rich doing this and whatnot." And I said, "No, I'm risking everything. Like, I'm putting my home on the line for this company." And I think that really resonated. And I think they also see, like, when they come to work and I'm here early and I'm here late and they see the work ethic, I think that kind of stuff is good for them to see, other than you show up to a different facility at 9 a.m. and you leave early and they don't really see that, no, we're living and breathing this every day. And I think that motivates them and puts dedication in their mind. And I always tell them, we do resume classes with them. And we told them, we said, a bunch of you guys that applied here and got jobs did a terrible job interviewing, and you did a terrible job on your resume. So let's talk about that and help you guys. So one, when we post jobs that you want to move up into here, management roles, you can come into an interview and crush it. And number two, if you want to leave here and you have an opportunity for a really great job that you want, or you get married and your husband has to move to Seattle and you have to go get a new job, I want you leaving here prepared to go interview and crush it and get a great job somewhere. And that's what I would want a company to do for my kids, instead of acting like every employee we ever hire is going to stay here. No, I want them to grow. And at the point that they want to quit their job and go chase their dream, I want them prepared to do that.
That's super empowering, man. And I think that's also a rarity in professional culture. So I love hearing that. Again, I think the Bowyer podcast is probably not like the best marketing mechanism, because we should be diving into the knives and the models and the next drop, which we will certainly get into. But man, I want to hear people's story and what makes them real and genuine. And selfishly, I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I think it also helps people understand. It's going to be a little bit of wake-up calls. One, some younger folks, don't be afraid to ask the guy next door that's always working on his car and seems like he knows what he's doing, but you also don't know how to change your own oil.
Yeah.
Maybe ask, because you'll probably freaking love it, man. I love helping you out. My neighbor is pretty affluent. He's got more boats than what he knows what to do with. And I take my kids out on the boat or whatever, and they're just kind of like nervous and anxious. And he's, "Can I take them out?" I'm like, "Yeah, man." Because they think he's the coolest guy in the world. He's like in his early 70s, but he is a waterman. Like he fishes every single freaking day, rain or shine, whatever. And they know that he is like the subject matter expert. I'm like, "Man, hey, this weekend you're going out with Rocky. He's taking you out on the boat." And he's showing them knots and different fishing lures and teaching them about water quality. But so there's some fishing aspects, which I think is important, but he's teaching them like water skills and boatsmanship and all this stuff too. And also, let's face it, like the guys that have skills are future millionaires. I also think, right? I think there's 100%. All this hype and tech and everything else. And eventually that is going to be transition to something with ones and zeros and not with fingers and toes.
Yeah.
And I think tradesmen or people that have crafts or are in a craft or a trade are future 7-figure earners.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, as a father of 2 boys, 10 and 12, I'm trying to highlight that to them too. Also, when I look back and I'm sitting behind a laptop nowadays, I'm like, man, you mentioned being a lineman. My kid brother's 10 years younger. He's a lineman. He's outside all the damn time.
Yeah.
Loves his job. Yeah, I'm 40 now. Is it too old to change to become a an apprentice lineman or an apprentice plumber or something like that, right?
Yeah. The answer is no. I tell my employees all the time. I think people actually think, and this is actually a good lesson for people. When I gave a commencement speech at a high school, I said, everybody's thought that Josh Smith has his life figured out from the time he's 11 years old, a knife maker, going to be a knife maker, and got my journeyman and master smith. And so I just had this plan figured out for my whole life. But I was a knife maker through high school and helping my dad and whatnot. Went to college, was going to be in construction engineering, dropped that, went into business, duck hunted my way out of that, flunked to college, went back, went to work for my parents, then got married, went to work for an excavation guy in Missoula. As soon as I got my home loan, my first home loan, I quit that job and started making knives full time. Then I quit that job to become a backhoe operator for the power company, then tried to become a welder. I thought I was going to be a welder there on the pipe side, the gas side. Then I decided to be a lineman. So I got a groundman job and an apprenticeship and did the lineman thing for 10 years. And then turned around and started MKC when I was 39 years old. And I did have that thought of, man, am I too old I'm supposed to be 20 years away from retiring. Had very little savings, about 6 months, very little 401k, because I'd only ever started investing when I got my lineman job, just because that's part of your check. And the point is, I hear people 30 years old, this is just what I do. And it's like, you're 30. Like, you quit that, you have 30 more years to work a career if you only work till 60. And most people work longer than that. So it's never too late for people. And I agree. I talked to Mike Rove and I have become friends, the Dirty Jobs guy. He's constantly talking about the trades. I see this. They're talking right now in the news about the AI bubble and what's AI going to replace and whatnot. And AI is not going to rip shingles off a roof and put a new roof on it. But yeah, there's some AI in construction. I think you're going to start seeing a lot of houses basically 3D printed and stuff like that. There's definitely robots involved in that. But there are electricians, linemen, plumbers, roofers, backhoe operators. There is still going to be a need for the trades. And I agree with you. I think those are going to be the people that are making the most money down the road. And I look at the skills that I learned. I tell people, if you're 19 years old, go get a job with an excavation company, work there for a year or two. If you don't like it, quit, go do roofing, go do plumbing, go do mechanical. Because I guarantee you, when you're 40 years old and you're building your own house down the road and you have some electrical skills from a job you did for 2 years when you're 20, you're going to use those skills over and over in your life. I guarantee it. My excavation skills, I did all my own dirt work for the building we're sitting in. I built my own road into my house. Awesome. I think those are skills that you can always find benefit from, even if it doesn't become your career.
I love it, man. I love it. And thank you for sharing that. I think it's going to be of tremendous value for our listeners, young and old. It's also just, it kind of reminds me of one of Stephen Pressfield's books called Do the Work. It was a sequel or part 2 to his book called The War of Art. But it's really just getting your act together and doing the thing that you're passionate about and something that you love. And you just put that in audiobook format.
Yeah. And like with making bows, I tell people sometimes will message me and they'll be like, your story inspired me. I want to start a bow making business. I'm going to quit my job next week and start my bow making business. And I'm always like, hold on. Maybe you shouldn't just quit right away. Maybe for the next couple months, you should get up earlier and go to bed later and let that job keep paying your house payment.
Yeah.
And start building that bow business before and after work. Don't put your family at risk. And that's what I did with MKC. I didn't quit my job until I absolutely basically was forced to. And if you're not passionate enough about, say, making bows as a living, if you're not passionate enough to wake up at 5 a.m. to do it, then you probably shouldn't do it. Sure. Because what you're going to find when you are full-time is that you have to get up at 5 a.m. Everybody wants to be their own boss and wants to run their own company. And then once you realize, I don't just show up at 8 a.m. and shut it off at 4:30 in the afternoon and go fishing. Like, you're going to live and breathe this. So if you're not willing to live and breathe it before you quit your job, you probably shouldn't quit your job.
Yeah, man. I think that's really great. I know Corey Hawk, we've had these conversations many times. Again, he's one of those guys that turned his passion into profession.
Yeah.
You talked about being a starving artist or a starving maker too, right? It's seasonal. There's some seasonality to it, right? There's a lot of people buying knives around freaking hunting seasons and all that stuff. It might be slower periods. With he's a man from November to January. That's my famine season. But he goes, on the bright side, that's when I'm in the woods hunting all the time too. It makes sense. And then there's a couple of super hot months in the summer. He's like, that's when we're traveling. I'm not making stuff because we're traveling. He goes, we've had to impose some frugality around those famine months. But then again, we get to make up for it during the months of harvest or feast, if you will. And I know that your business is much larger now and everything else, Josh, but you mentioned that earlier in life, right? If you're sitting in a tree stand and it's slow and you're not putting meat in the freezer, you feel like there's a little internalizing that guilt of, oh, I'm lighting money on fire right now.
Yeah. It's actually a really good point. I talked to Harvey Dean. He's a master bladesmith about this. He's spent a whole career now, 30, 40 years making knives. And him and I used to talk about this when I was a custom knife maker. I'm talking to a 50 or 5-year-old guy going to a knife show needing to sell knives to pay his bills, right? And I was asking him for some mentorship back then. And I'm like, man, that's a tough spot to be in when you're in your 50s and 60s, still needing to sell knives to pay the bills. And he said, my wife and I realized a long time ago that I was never going to be a rich man doing what I'm doing. I was never going to become wealthy making knives. But he said, because of what I do, he said, I get experiences that the guy that's going to the office punching a clock every single day doesn't get to do. He said, I sell knives to a knife customer that might have a big ranch in Texas and be like, hey, come out and hunt a big whitetail. And I get to go to really cool restaurants because there's a chef that loves my knives. And I go to New York City and eat at a restaurant that everyone else has to wait a month to get into. And I get the head chef's table and dinner's on the chef. And he said, there's experiences that you get. If you're Corey Hawk and you're making bows, you get to meet cool people. You get to live differently than the guy that is beholden to a clock. That when you die and go to heaven and you look back at your life, you got some experiences that money couldn't have bought, no matter how much money you made. And so life isn't necessarily, and I know it's cliche, but it's truly not just all about the money, right? It's about experiences. And like Harvey said, we had to live in a very modest home, and Christmas was modest, and a lot of things were modest. But he said also, for example, these kids are off in the summertime, and if he wanted to take his boy fishing Monday afternoon at 3 p.m, he could just take his boy fishing. And he said everyone else is at work. So there's definitely advantages to being your own boss and to building bows or building knives for a living, but there's also some hardship with that too.
Absolutely. No, I think it's awesome though, but I also think that, again, you and I are both in our 40s and we're coming to a point in life, and don't let me speak for you, but time is a greater currency than greenbacks at this point, right? And it's, especially with kids and everything else, it's what it's going to provide me more time with my bride and my 2 man cubs. That's usually what's going to win at the end of the day. It doesn't mean there's distractions, right, for chasing the paycheck and things of that nature, but man,
I'm already regretting time wasted with my kids that when I was younger and driving hard and trying to survive. That here we're talking like old people now, but for people that do have younger kids, everybody tells you that time flies and whatever else. And that's hard to imagine when they're all sick at one time and they're all shitting their pants.
Yeah.
But I have 2 kids that are now in college, and I always thought, when my kids get older, I'm going to go hunting with them and we're going to do all this and that. And my 17-year-old son's the star of the basketball team and can't miss practice and has all these open gyms and these camps he's going to. And he's not even available to go hunt. My 2 daughters that are off in college and doing their thing, I hardly see them. My daughter has basketball practice. Thanksgiving is tomorrow. She has basketball practice at 8 a.m. She's going to drive home, be home for about 6 hours, and drive back because she has a game the next day.
Oof.
And I'm sitting here going, God, I just want to be with my kids. And had I really known and been able to put this feeling into my kind of heart and soul when they were 8 years old, yeah, I definitely would have even done more. So you're right. Time and that currency of that value of spending that time with your children out in the woods hunting, making a peak meal on the side of a mountain. And I used to take my kids quote unquote deer hunting, like we weren't going to see shit, but they thought it was so cool to make a fire in the woods and cook a mountain house meal.
Yeah.
And man, if your kid's 6 years old, take them out in the woods and take them quote unquote hunting and let them be noisy and enjoy that time, because when they're 17, 19 years old, they also have their own lives.
You, man, I don't want to interject with my own story because you're the guest, but it'll resonate, I think, is when we were living in the central part of the state, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. And I took my now eldest, who's 12. So I think he was like 6 or so at the time. And my boys are very different. My eldest is very introverted and analytical. My youngest is extroverted and wears his emotions on his sleeve. He never hides the emotion. My eldest does. So we were out there and we went fishing. We were catfishing. So we take my little John boat up the river and we find an island in the river. And I get out and I basically have like a machete. I'm cutting limbs and tall grass down so we could put up a tent. And we're bottom fishing and we're catching really nice channel cats and blue cats, like some that are 18, 20 pounds. At the time, he's 45 pounds or something. So looking at fish and holding him, sitting in his lap, and he's reeling fish is pretty awesome. And there's one point where the embankment was really steep and I slipped when I was reeling in a fish. And it was so steep that when I slid in the river, I went like over my head. And I just went up the reel and I was like, here's the reel, buddy. And he's trying to reel this in when I'm like sliding in the mud, trying to get back up on the bank. And it was at the time I was looking at it was like a disaster. And he thought it was like fun. And then we're laying in, after we probably caught 6 or 8 nice cats, put them in the freezer or in the ice chest on ice. And this is what started the tradition too. Like we rarely eat a lot of processed stuff in the house, but when we stopped at the bait shop, they had Pop-Tarts. So now Pop-Tarts have become, since then, the camp food too. He wants to put it next to the fire to heat it up. So he had his little Pop-Tarts. We get to bed and it wasn't raining. So we had the rain tarp off and we look at the stars and he's just like quiet and he's cuddling with me in the sleeping bag. He goes, Dad? I go, yeah. He goes, this was my favorite day.
Yeah.
And to this day, 6 years later, that's still one of my most vivid and favorite memories of my life. And it's just, and there was so much shit that went wrong on that day, on that weekend, man. Like it was hot, miserable. The bugs were bad because we live in the swamps. And to him, that was his favorite day.
And he's going to remember that literally forever. And this is actually when it hit me. I wished I had known this when my kids were really young. My kids have always been into athletics. They've all been very good, usually the leaders of their team. My boy was an incredible football player all through grade school and junior high. And I coached his team. We won championship after championship, and he was the star of the team and all this stuff, right? And then same thing with basketball and whatnot. And to this day, still a hell of an athlete. And I asked him one day, probably when he was like a sophomore in high school, I was like, because he was talking about one of the European mounts on our wall of a deer mount. And it was a deer that we had gotten when he was probably 10. And he remembered literally every detail of like where we parked the camper, what we did on each day of the hunt, that farmer's field where the haystack was here and the old truck was parked. He knew every detail vividly of that hunt like it happened yesterday. And I was like, hey, tell me about what's your most memorable game that you've ever played of all your sports, basketball, football, baseball. And he's had tons of success in all of them. And I was like, tell me like the top couple games that you remember. And he thinks, and he's probably when we won the championships. And I was like, no, tell me about a specific game. And he was like, I don't really know. Like I just kind of remember like that we were good, like winning all the championships. There wasn't a single game that he could remember where he had 5 or 6 touchdowns or he threw a great pass or any of that. I then asked him about every deer rack on the wall from 10 years of hunting, deer or elk or whatever. And he went through and could remember every deer rack. Oh, that one was over in Jordan, Montana. That one was over in this farmer's field. This one was over here. Hunting does something different. That showed me right then and there. That's what's so special about hunting, being out with whether it's your dad or your mom, your siblings, your friends. There is a different kind of bond and thing that happens. I think it's deep within our core. I think it's back to caveman days.
Ooh, it's at our cellular level, soul and cellular level.
It is, and it shows you how aware you are when you're actually out there. Like even as a kid, he was aware of everything that was happening, and it was sticking in his mind to the point where he can remember and recall. And same with my daughters. They can all recall all these details. But if I ask them, tell me about the game that we won by 30 in the college football stadium here, where you were you got the game ball, and he can't tell you about 2 plays in it, but he can tell you every day of every hunt. So it really does show, and that should be a message to people with young kids, that you might be looking at it like, God, we're going fishing and all I'm going to do is untangle lines all day and deal with problems. But what you really need to realize is that what you're doing out there is having such a deep core impact on those kids and those memories that it's going to be worth it someday.
Yeah, man, it really is. And again, thanks again for sharing that look under the hood. Man, I know you've got a company to run, but if I want to hit on one more thing with you before we go, is something that I think is so compelling with MKC is, and it's been here from the inception, right, is the 4 C's.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of insight on that? Right, we know Montana knives MKC knives are amazing. They're the quality, their heirloom materials, all that stuff. So we won't hit on it. So talk to me about the qualitative pieces there with the 4 C's of MKC.
Yeah, that was a piece of advice that was given to us by a very successful guy that a lot of people might know in the hunting industry, Kip Folks. He started Under Armour. He's gone to Winter Strong a bunch. He said, you need to define in the very beginning of your company your core values, because you're going to get to a point, frankly, where we're at today, where you've had all this growth, you've got all this attention, and you start to have all these questions about who you are. And also as you start to have leaders that are leading and doing hiring within your company and training, and I can't be on in every interview now. I have people downstairs, frankly, I don't know their names yet. We have people that have just been starting. And so you have your leaders, and how do you keep on the right path, right? What's your North Star? So what are your core values, and what can you impart on your employees to make sure that keeps going? And so for us, we came up with those 4 C's, and those core values are, one is country. I think it really, for us, it starts with that. No other country in this world is the story of Montana Knife Company possible. And I truly believe that. Yes, there are free countries out there. Canada is a free country, right? And there's free countries in Europe and all this. And it goes much deeper than that. There's even the little community banking systems that we have in the US is not available to people in Europe. And my little community bank stood behind me when my house burned down. And they did a loan for my new home that I built, and they kept it in-house. And they just basically said, we know you, we know what you're about. We're going to help you, even though the numbers on this don't make sense. We know you're good for it. Same with the building I'm sitting in. I asked for a loan to build this building in my backyard for a knife company and basically I hid this whole thing from the county, and the bank freaking backed me. And there's a lot of things about our country that make Montana Knife Company possible. So I think that's one. And also the fact that wanting to bring American manufacturing back to this country, all these things we talked about earlier in the podcast about mentoring our employees and providing a good place to work and all this stuff that we're doing, the money we're giving to conservation, the support for whether it's North Carolina flood victims or California fire victims or Montana flood victims, that doesn't happen. That you don't see companies doing that are making knives in China, right? That's America, right? So country, American made knives, supporting American people. Then it's the customer. The only reason this is all possible is because of our customers. And if every decision you make is what's best for the customer, then you're gonna probably succeed and do. Next is community. And that's, again, us trying to really be a positive light in our community. And like our new facility on the hill, I'm very proud of what we're building right now, because when you drive into Missoula, the first building you now see when you drive into Missoula is our building with a giant 80-foot tall American flag flying over it.
That's awesome.
And it's not Home Depot and it's not Walmart. And this is a location where normally you would see a hotel or something like that at an exit. It's Montana Knife Company when you arrive into Western Montana. So I'm very proud of that. And the support of our, whether it's sponsoring Little League baseball teams or Boy Scouts or whatever, being a good community member. And we tell our employees, we're now really being watched and seen by a lot of people. And so when you're an employee of Montana Knife Company and you're in your community and your neighbor's dogs get into your neighbor's garbage can, go help them out, shovel their sidewalk. Like, we talk about that with our employees all the time. And then we get letters back from feedback from people in the community. We read one out loud in a meeting the other day, that how much help one of our employees has been for the little guy wrestling program at the school. And he's always willing to help. And he's always wearing a Montana Knife Company hat and shirt. And so they complimented us on he moved here. And so we added somebody great to our community, which I'm very proud of. And then the last piece is conservation. We're a hunting knife company first and foremost. And I'm very passionate. I was fortunate enough to be able to take my kids elk and deer hunting as I was raising them. And all this stuff we hear about public lands and them trying to get rid of public lands, the battle that we're always in with environmentalists over hunting rights and access and all that. We all need to be giving back, whether it's joining a conservation organization, if it's Wild Turkey or Ducks Unlimited or Rocky Mountain Elk, join it, give them your $35 a year. And if you're a bigger company, like all the shirts on our website that have Wild Sheep Foundation on it, Mule Deer Foundation, Rocky Mountain Elk, we did all those to donate all the proceeds from those shirts back to those organizations. So all those thousands of shirts we're selling, people are wearing that organization's brand all over the country, and that money is going back to that organization. If we can be making decisions based on all those things, then I think we're gonna be okay.
I love it, man. I love it. It's so genuine and pure, and more people need to follow suit. All right, brother, man. Where can folks find MKC?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Just montanaknifecompany.com. Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff at Montana Knife Company. I definitely appreciate you having me on. I'll say, people say, oh, you've made it, and how's it feel to have made it, and whatever else. And we're in the final 2 weeks of building this new manufacturing facility. It's 51,000 square feet. And we need the support more than ever. We get shadow banned still on social media really bad. Google is really hard for us to buy advertising on because we're a hunting knife company, and between the fact that we make weapons and the fact that we shoot animals, nothing is more important to us than customer word of mouth and having the opportunity to go on podcasts like this and talk to your guys' fans. But we and people like us, I don't care if it's a bow company, a knife company, a gun company. If people are making a product in America, they need people's support, and word of mouth is the best part, the best form of that we can get.